Right. Next up, we have our first panel discussion on the ways to effectively manage the cyber risk of the cloud. And it is indeed an honor for me to introduce our renowned contributors. Let me start with our eminent moderator, Mr. Marghalany, Cybersecurity Chief Officer, Medina Health Cluster, Mr. Mokhtar Al-Somali, Group Chief Information Security Officer, geidea, Mr. Shafiullah Ismail, VP, Heads Information Security Governance and Risk, a leading global investment firm. Mr. Shakir Al Ansari, Head of Cybersecurity Investigation and Response, Bank Muscat. Mr. Mohammad Tariq Ahmed Khan, Head of Cybersecurity Audits, Riyad Bank KSA, and Ms. Rami Ayoob, Chief Information Officer, Spark Tech Hub. Over to you, Mr. Abdullah, to moderate this session.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Ron. How are you? Okay, guys, welcome. I want to start by welcoming our panelists today, and thank you for our audience, also those who watching us. And I hope we can, with my great panelists today, we can have a great discussions today, inshallah. Let me start by introducing my panelists first. I'm welcoming first Mr. Muhammad Tariq. Mr. Muhammad Tariq, I think you need to, it is mute, yes. How are you, Mr. Muhammad Tariq?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we are hear you. Can you please introduce yourself for audience?
Yeah, Abdullah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to introduce myself. And first of all, I appreciate the efforts of TREX to conduct this kind of wonderful event, which would definitely increase the awareness, and they will also have the different leaders to join the community for the mutual benefit. Second thing, yes, I have around 20 years of experience comprising on IT, cybersecurity, and IT audit. Currently, I'm working in cybersecurity audits domain in internal audit in the banking sector.
It's great, and we are really appreciate your presence here. After that, we will go to the next panelist, who is Mr. Shakir. Mr. Shakir.
Hello, assalamu alaikum, and greetings to all my co-panelists, and also for all the audience who are joined into the session. And once again, just as Mr. Muhammad said, a big hats off to the TREX event organizing company for setting up such great forums. About myself, my name is Shakir. I'm currently working as the head of cybersecurity incident investigation and response at Bank Muscat, which is the leading bank in the Sultanate of Oman. And I come with around 15 plus years of experience. My experience is varied, starting from all the way, starting from the ground, from IT operations, and for quite a while, I was like a senior system administrator managing a cloud infrastructure, a private cloud infrastructure. And over the past couple of years, I have shifted my focus to cybersecurity. And I'm really enjoying this field, because this is one of the most dynamic fields I have worked in. And that is after coming with 15 years of experience. Every single day, you get to learn something new, you get to see something new, and that keeps it very challenging. So hope to have a very productive discussion with the entire team, and greetings once again to everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Shakir. What is a great introducing, and I hope, inshallah, you will complete in the same interest, with the same this motivation. Thank you for motivating us. And next is Mr. Shafi. Mr. Shafi.
Hi all. Yeah, it's a pleasure meeting you all through this channel. So this is Shafiullah. I'm based out of UAE. I'm based here in UAE. I'm working for Mubadala Capital. It's a investment firm. I have like 16 plus years of experience in cybersecurity, handling risk, governance, and security architecture. You guys know, like, cybersecurity is a ever-evolving topic of discussion. I'm 100% confident that today's discussion is going to be more productive, and it's going to be a learning experience for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shafiullah. And to our last panelist, Mr. Rami. Mr. Rami, how are you?
Hi, Abdullah. Assalamu alaikum. It was nice to join this summit, which is useful, which give an extra layer, okay, in regard of how to secure the environment in different levels. Definitely, my name is Rami Ayoob. I'm Chief Information Officer at Spartek Hub. So with experience with more than 17 years in IT field, held different position in different industrial solutions as well. So my background is how to play a key factor to secure and govern the organization firm, okay, their objectives, their goals in secure way, and to reach their goals in the right manner. So we hope today we give insight to the audience how to achieve our goals in secure way, how to make our work environment more productive and secure. Thank you.
I hope that too. Thank you, Mr. Rami. And if you allow me to start with Tariq, Mr. Muhammad Tariq, with the first questions. Mr. Muhammad, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Mr. Muhammad, I want to ask you these questions. And we want to, since you are an audit and from the audit domain, let me ask you that what is the role of audit, and what are the key challenges encountered when auditing cloud service?
Yeah, thank you so much, Abdullah, asking this critical question. Actually, in general, the role of audit is to perform an independent assessment and provide a reasonable assurance on the controls and design effectiveness of any environment. So this is a general audit role. So with regards to cloud services, so whenever we have to do other audits, we have to do cloud computing audits also. So this is the normal process, So I will tell you the challenges as an internal auditor we face when we conduct the audit of cloud service providers. To start this, first of all, we should understand this. There are two parties involved in any cloud services. One is the cloud service provider, and another party is the customer or client. So both have the shared responsibilities in using and managing, depending on the type of model they are using. Both have the shared responsibilities to manage and use the cloud services. As an internal auditor, what we face normally, when it comes to the shared responsibilities, and these shared responsibilities are documented in the contract, so there is a role which customer has to play. An organization has to play, who is the customer, the service provider. But what I see, most of the roles, when the contract is signed and the service, is started, employees start using their services, the cloud services, they forget about their role. And there are, some responsibilities which they should be held accountable or liable to perform some, responsibility in terms of cybersecurity, some technology-wise, managing the data, all of these things, but they forget about it. So this is the most important, the challenge which we face, that there are some configuration which they have to perform, but they don't perform. There are some features, data security features they have to enable, but they don't enable. And when we go to the service provider and ask for the contract, they say, yeah, this is our responsibility. So then here in this case, we are, our hands are tied. Second thing is that, when customer use their, data and upload it to the cloud environment, and, they forget to classify the data. And classification of data, identification of data is most important challenge when we face. When you don't have the data classified or identified, how would you assume service provider will secure it? So this is the second challenge. The third challenge is that, you know, despite of all of these things, when we say, okay, let us review the context, let us review the clauses there, then we find out the exit criteria is so much difficult, and it is very highly expensive for the organization to change it. So we are stuck in a, you know, in an environment where things cannot be improved, things, you know, cannot be changed. So this is the challenge which we face normally. Okay, when we say, okay, these are the things which at the customer side or client, at the client side, when we talk to, okay, service provider, okay, we want to audit your controls. We want to audit your security environment or control environment there. So they say, no, you are not allowed because we don't do this. So when we go back to the refer to the contract again, then again we see this, there is a problem because we don't have the right in the contract. We need to go and audit them. So I believe there are 2 or 3 things which I believe when the cloud services are hired, acquired by any organization, any customer, they should really highlight or determine their role, and they should really comply with it. You know, they have to do this. Second thing is that they should also mention the right to audit clause in the contract in case there is a fraud, there is an incident, so we can also, you know, hold a service provider accountable in this case. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Muhammad, for this. And I actually, it was very, very important point, especially on the resistance of the providers and these fightings, and not allowing and focusing also on data classification. It was very clear point. You said clearly and very, very important. Thank you for that. Let me ask you also second question, if you allow me, Mr. Muhammad, before going to other panelists. How cloud service provider and their customers can benefit from cloud compliance? Because you are focusing on there will be resistance. So how we can make it win-win procedures or win-win case?
Yeah, it is again a very good question, Abdullah. Actually, you know, regulatory compliance, so, you know, compliance certification is an important aspect which should be considered by the service providers as well as by the customers or clients. So, you know, there are different certifications are available in the market. Some of the certifications, you know, some of the requirements are enforced by the regulators in a country, in Saudi, Oman, different places. Let's say PCI DSS, and we have Internet Standard Organization 27017, 27018, and SOC 2 reporting. So these are kind of certifications I believe should be there, you know, should be there for the service providers. And when a customer, you know, wants to go for any service provider, they have a list of the service providers. So this certification will help them to get the confidence level, how certified they are, how secure they are, because there's a third party who's certifying the service provider for any kind of thing. So they must have checked their controls and, you know, their environment, and they must have given the certificate to the service provider. So this kind of third party assurance is very important for the service provider. And if you take it from the customer or client's perspective, and when they are going to select any vendor, any service provider, they should focus on this, whether these certified providers are there or not, and they should not go for those service providers who are not certified. So it is for the win-win situation for the both people. One perspective, when the service provider is certified by these kind of PCI, ISO, other certification, they will be more, you know, people will be more confident in acquiring their services. At the same time, it is good for the customers. They will not focus only those service providers who are not certified. So it is a win-win situation for both of them.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. And now let's go to our great panelist, Engineer Rami. Engineer Rami, do you hear us?
Yes, Abdullah.
Engineer Rami, I want to ask you, what are the required security checklists before selecting the cloud service provider? We heard from the Mr. Tariq and Mr. Muhammad Tariq, what the issues between the customers and the provider. So what checklist I need to have, and what the cloud model that fit to the organization's need?
Thanks, Abdullah, and thanks for the earliest panelists for a complete overview about how we can comply with the regulations, with many standards and policies. So here, before we go into any implementation in such solution or technology, organization by themselves, they should understand where they are today and what they are looking from future. Okay, you know, implementing the right solution, there is not only one model or one technology that can fit to exact direction. So organizations themselves, they need to do their internal exercises to understand what is their objectives, what is their goal, what their expectation when they are concerning to the digital transformation. So here, when we are talking about a checklist, there is a list of things or activities shall be done internally before they move to the next level. One of the things they need to understand the data modeling. Okay, the type of data they have, what type of access they need, the information that need to be shared, need to be accessed, need to be edited. So this exercise, they should do data classification, which will be within the system in themselves, which group to be access to that list, and the activity to do in that data. Also, they have to label their data so they can have more organized information that's stored to their system. Also, one of the exercises that they have to do it, okay, the cloud model, okay, they are moving for. As you know, today we have multiple vendors, multiple technology cloud provider, which provide a certain services in the cloud, such like infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as well, plus other models. So here the organization themselves, they should understand what type of model they are going to completely active passive, that they change all their operation over cloud, or they are working in hybrid model, or they are going to upload certain services to the cloud. So this should be addressed, this should be understood and planned before they move. Also, they have to concern about the country regulations. Each country have their own regulations. The regulations in Saudi differ than the other country like UAE, Bahrain, and others. Some countries allow to host some information in the cloud, some not. It should be on the premise. So this aspect should be addressed as well. Understand the regulation of the country that they are going to operate with. Also, the vendor list available in that country. Okay, which vendor can meet to this regulation? They are comply with the country themselves or not? So these elements shall be addressed, okay, to have a fully insight about their project they are going. Because as you know, when you assign the resources to implement such a project, it's cost a lot of money, a lot of effort. So once these elements are not clear and are not addressed, it will move us to a different direction, okay, which end up with non-conformity to the purpose of the project itself. At the top of that, we need to build a security platform. Okay, here what we mean by security platform. Security platforms is not only tools or system or software that implement for you the security. Security platform is a methodology how to comply with the internal policy. So the internal policy for the organization shall be cleared, shall be signed, shall be approved by the governance of the enterprise itself, shall be awareness. What is the internal policies? How the policies is regard the information. So it's be aware between all the stakeholders. So they have to understand what policies they have. Then once we move to implement a security environment, cybersecurity over cloud, the cloud provider shall be comply with these policies. So to align the both direction that we are in the same domain, in the same pot of security infrastructure. So this is a few of many elements that should be understandable, should be aware, should be addressed before we move implementation, any cloud solution, before we move with any cybersecurity platform. So this is the overview about this checklist and the methodology of this implementation.
Thank you, Engineer Rami. You mentioned great ideas and thoughts and steps. Let me, one of things I like it, you said that it is not only the checklist or the model, it is not only a technical. There are some administrative things like policies, internal policies, awareness. All these need an administrative work. Thank you for that, Mr. Rami. Mr. Shafiullah. Mr. Shafiullah, do you hear me?
Yep. Yes, Abdullah, can hear you.
Thank you. And let me ask you that from cloud point of view, how are we addressing data-related regulatory and state concerns?
Yeah, it's an interesting question again, right? And especially for the compliance and privacy officers, because each and every organization, when we plan to move to cloud, we need to get a go-ahead from compliance. We need to go ahead. We need to get an approval from the privacy officers to go and put the data in the cloud, right? So yeah, we have seen companies racing towards hybrid and public clouds in recent years. And also we have seen some of the big Ps like Google, AWS, Microsoft expanding their geolocation presence as well, right? Recently we have AWS opening their center in UAE. They have one close in Bahrain. Similarly, Microsoft, they have pretty much covered all the GCC regions as well. So it gives more comfort zone for companies, to go and put their workloads, their data on their respective regions. That's more interesting. And apart from that, when you talk about the regulators or the federal laws, in last couple of years we have seen government enforcing the data and privacy regulations, right? So they are more keen on how data should be protected, how the personal data needs to be handled. So these are some of the hot discussions when it comes to the data and when we start thinking of moving towards the cloud. So it's important to align with the regulators' requirement, right? Because there's nothing to say no to the regulators. So here are some of the, I would say some of the controls which we need to adhere before moving towards the cloud when we talk about the data. As a starting point, each and every organization needs to redraw the data residency matrix. It's very important because this data residency matrix talks about where you're going to put your data, whether it's going to be on the local cloud or it's going to be somewhere on the US region or the UK region. So it's more of a region specific. The next important thing about the data is the data classification. I've seen both Tariq as well as the other panelists giving some outline about the data classification. It's again very vital because whenever you talk about the data classification needs to be there because data classification gives us more insight on the sensitivity level of data. So here in the whole picture, when the data classification for us gives us information on what level of information we are going to send to the cloud and what level of information is going to be residing on the cloud. So that picture needs to be captured. Then the third important point is the data encryption. So normally when we discuss about the cloud journey, right? So we get into a discussion with the cloud vendor, whether the data will be encrypted or, whether the data channel which we are communicating is encrypted, right? So data encryption again plays a vital role, but again, there is a clause here. So data encryption comes in two ways. Number one, the vendor encrypts the data, which means the vendor can see the data. But there's other way where we call it as a customer managed encryption key, where the customer encrypts the data and the customer holds the key for the data. So again, it's important. If it's a sensitive information, I would strongly urge that customer needs to go for the customer managed encryption key. If it's a generic data, we can rely on the provider's encryption state. The last important thing is the contracts. So we need to give more value to the contract because we need to have a cloud contract with these providers, right? So the contract is it's more of a governing terms with the providers, right? So the most important point which we need to emphasize on the contract is at the time of the termination. Okay, how are the providers going to ensure that the data is going to be erased, and how the data is going to be handed over to the customers or the consumers? So that's important, and that needs to be covered as part of the contract. So these are some of the controls which we need to ensure that it is being practiced in the order, so that the data can be easily flown or easily put it in the cloud, and it can be governed in more efficient way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shafiullah, and I agree. Thank you for mentioning the data classification and agreed with Muhammad Tariq on it. Mr. Shakir.
Yes.
Sorry for keeping you on the last. Let me ask you that the discipline of risk management in the context of information security, information and cybersecurity is well established, and my question is, what unique challenge does the adoption of cloud services bring and which makes us popular risk assessment and management framework possible in the QA?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Abdullah, for that question. Well, I guess one thing that I share common with the other panelists here is all of us do a bit of risk management in our day-to-day role, whether even if it's like we manage the risk and audit, make sure that everything is in order. So we go back to what is the discipline of risk management. Risk management at the end of the day is primarily constituted of two activities, right? So you do risk assessment and then you do risk treatment. So at the end of the day, you try to give, as a risk management professional, you try to give assurance to your organization that this risk, that a specific information system, whether it be cloud or be it on-premise or regardless of the nature of the information system, the risk associated with it, with the surrounding security controls or compensatory controls, is something that brings it within our risk appetite, and we are able to sustain operations based upon this, considering all the risks. Now, the challenge, what happens here is the traditional risk management frameworks that we generally follow in our day-to-day lives and in traditional information security systems, for example, ISO 27005 or ISO 3100, the NIST 800 standard. The problem with these is, or the challenge or the gap that we see here is, these models are primarily, the output of this model would be, it's a qualitative or semi-quantitative in nature. Okay, so it gives you a broad framework that allows you to identify the risks. You come up with a risk treatment plan, you put control objectives in place, you assess these, and then you repetitively go through the cycle. All right. But the problem here with the cloud environment, because a cloud environment, like any other information system, is subject to similar risks, but with cloud, it gets magnified and complicated, primarily because of the number of interactions that you have. This can be interactions based upon different systems, different vendors. Like if it's like, for example, it again, and the depth of the risk or the level of the risk that the organization undergoes completely depends upon the nature of cloud service that you're going for. For example, if I were to take infrastructure as a service from a cloud service provider, I still hold a majority of the stuff within myself, like within my organizational bounds. Like it's basically, I'm just taking the infrastructure as a service, but the operating system, the application sitting on it, the database, the security controls, everything is still within my hand as a customer. But the minute I move from infrastructure as a service and go to platform as a service, software as a service, slowly I start relinquishing control. So then it becomes more of a shared responsibility. So then that's where the question comes, what is the responsibility of the customer or the cloud consumer, and what is the responsibility of the cloud provider? And anyone in audit will say, when you have multiple people who are that accountability, responsibility, when that area becomes a bit gray, that is where you run into problems. So this is one of the key challenges. It's like the nature, the dynamic environment, and the fact that it is not one model fits all. Like I cannot use the same framework as an organization to assess the risk on a service which is infrastructure as a service and use the same framework tomorrow if I'm going for platform as a service. So I need to be able to adapt my framework depending. So I need to have these different use cases in place and to be able to adjust to these models when I'm assessing the risk in my organization. A second thing is a majority of our traditional risk management frameworks, the ones that I said earlier, are based on the assumption that it's an on-premise system, because primarily these frameworks have been there for a very long time. As our moderator also very rightly said, these are very mature and very well-established frameworks. But the basis of this framework is built on the assumption that I own the system, as in the system resides on my premise. So to put it, like the number of known unknowns is much less. So when the number of known unknowns is much less, I can control the risk. I can assess the risk. I can put a control in place. But with cloud, the minute you have dynamic environment, the environment changes day on day, minute on minute, the number of interactions, the number of services, the number of providers, the number of APIs, the security with the API, you are talking about insider threat. Now, on an on-premise organization, insider threat is limited to your employees, and you assess the risk, people, procedure based upon your employees. However, in a cloud environment, if I'm taking platform or software as a service, the underlying infrastructure or the insider threat is almost unknown to me, right? I mean, I'm sure that all the panelists can, gauge that sort of risk that it comes along with it. So it's a matter of relinquishing control. So can I assure my organization with that much level of control lying in somebody else's, or that much level of responsibility in someone else's hand? And another thing that I think what makes these traditional risk management and the job of the risk assessor, a cyber risk or information security risk engineer, a lot more difficult is, again, the dynamic nature of the cloud. Okay, in traditional risk assessment, let's say that I have periodic assessment is something we all do, right? This is one of the key pillars of risk management in cybersecurity or information security, right? So you put your controls in place, you make sure your security controls are there, and then you do periodic assessment. So if it's a mission critical system, I might do a periodic assessment every 1 month. It can be internal assessment, third party assessment, whatever I do to get that assurance. So it's a periodic assessment. Okay, if it is a less critical system, I might do it every quarterly. But in a cloud environment where the environment itself is so dynamic, how frequent is enough? The question comes to how frequent is enough. And what I feel is, it's like, what is the depth of risk assessment that you are supposed to do? Because in especially when you're dealing with cloud brokers or cloud service providers, they themselves have so many subcontractors underlying that their infrastructure or the service that they provide you. So to what depth are you supposed to gauge the risk to get it within your organization's risk appetite? Because a lot of the recent threats that I'm sure that we must have heard or that made the news probably in the last 1 year are places where like big players have been targeted. Like, for example, you're having your MSSPs that get targeted. Now MSSPs in principle provide their services to so many different organizations. So as an attacker, like, okay, the attack keeps getting more complex. So as a threat actor, I would rather, like, it makes probably more sense for me to attack an MSSP than an individual client, because getting through the defenses of a managed security provider or a cloud provider or a broker would give me access to not one victim, but a multitude of victims. So I feel all these, all the dynamic nature, the level of the threat, the number of interactions is what makes probably applying a traditional risk management framework a bit outdated. So this is my point of view.
Can I say something here?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yeah, Shakir, you have very well explained the challenges you face in the risk assessment, and the cloud service is dynamic, and threats and risks are also dynamic. So since I'm an auditor, I provide some advisory services. So I would suggest something here. Organizations should consider automating the risk assessment framework and your risk assessment and treatment services there. And there are many products available in the market. They should evaluate them, see whatever is fit for their requirement, they can use it. And this is not sufficient only because when you automate the risk assessment framework, you also need to see the threats are also dynamic. They are also changing. So, and we also know this, that hackers or hacktivists, they are using artificial intelligence, machine learning, some other emerging technologies to, victimize the company's organization. So in this case, what I suggest, organizations should also equip themselves with these technologies, machine learning or AI or whatever, and they should also utilize this to better fight with them, to better prevent this kind of frauds and hacking attempts or incidents. So what I suggest here, I suggest organizations should have this automated risk assessment GRC system. They should also integrate it with the automated threat engines. So they can get the direct feeds, time to time, and then if you get the direct feeds from threats from worldwide, and you also have automated risk assessment system. So these all things can become real time. So this is the only way we can get rid of this traditional or conventional risk assessment or this thing. It will also add value to organization, and it will also save money and the resources, all of these things. This is just a suggestion.
No, 100%, Mr. Tariq. This is very rightly said, and this is something that even we are having to consider as organizations. We would, because like with risk assessment or with any other practice, we need to be able to apply it in a consistent and cyclical way, and like it should be like, and we should be able to interpret the results in a consistent manner. Because if every risk assessment we do for a different cloud service gives us a different kind of a more qualitative rather than quantitative analysis, then everything is subject to interpretation. So yeah, you're right, 100%. We need to remove the level of interpretation that you need to do for every of these risk assessment. You're 100% right, and automation is one of the ways to go for. Yes, thank you for that insight. Definitely valid.
Thank you for this discussion. It was very great. Mr. Shakir, let me ask you this question. From your point of view, as cloud customer and as cloud customer's perspective, how would you adapt your organizational risk management framework? And what additional activities would you undertake, and what risk area would you need to consider?
Thank you, Abdullah. There is one thing that I would like to, in answering your question, there is something that all the other co-panelists highlighted on, which is something that you cannot get away from, regardless of whether you decide to be on-premise or move to the cloud. That is your data. Your data is your key crown jewel, right? So that is what everything is about. It's information. The threat, or what the attacker is after is information. And okay, for example, I come from the banking industry. It's all about PII and card data. This is what we look to secure. This is the transactional data that we look to secure. So there is no running away from the fact that at every point, your start point of your risk assessment that you would do as a cloud consumer also still remains with the categorization. So you need to be able to identify what a specific, before you take the decision to go to the cloud, you need to identify what is the information system, what is its objective, what is the kind of data that it is going to handle. That is your start point. There is no going away from that. And what is the impact should there be an outage to that functionality? Like, it could be an impact to the organization if you're a customer facing like if you provide services to the customers, like for example, a banking, what is the impact to the customer for an outage or an impact on a specific system? So you come out with a, like a rating. So that would depend, because depending upon the rating of the system, like in our organization, we call it a security categorization, depending upon the different parameters, the type of data, the availability, and so many different factors, we come out with the rating. And this is a standard risk framework that is followed. This is your start point. Yeah, you identify what it is, what the system needs to do. All right. Then, based upon that, in a traditional environment, you would decide upon probably what sort of architecture a system would follow. Like, where would I position the system? Would it be on the perimeter? Would it be behind how many layers of defense? And what are the controls that would go on top of that system? This is what I would traditionally do in an on-premise environment. However, in a cloud, I would need to start assessing these things in terms of what the provider can give me, because a single service, the minute you decide to go to cloud, depending upon the nature of service that you're looking for or the information system objective you're looking to achieve, there are multitude of cloud providers who can provide you. There are very few, unique niche offerings that are remaining, because that's the world of the cloud. Yeah, like there is an innovator, and then the next day everyone has the service, and probably someone who does the service offering in a much better way. So then you start assessing the service provider, what can he do? Like amongst the different service providers, you need to understand which is the one service provider, cloud service provider, who can meet your needs. The second thing is based upon the categorization, the security categorization of the system. You also have to pick what is the model that you're going to go for. Like, do I go for infrastructure as a service? Do I go for platform as a service? Or do I go for software as a service? And then accordingly, that decision is key to how I will carry on with the rest of the process, right? So I will identify what is the service provider. I will identify what are the capabilities of the service provider from securing. So like if it is my critical data, what are the controls that he have? What are the technology solutions that he can provide me as a consumer to address my security concerns and to meet the compliance requirements of my organization. So one of the things that I feel like, at least out of my experience, a couple of the mistakes that we used to make in the earlier days of cloud adoption is everything was down to the SLA. Like if the service outage happens, how soon you can bring my service back. And this was primarily what, because again, the more nines that you include in your SLA, proportionally your bill will go up, right? Your hosting charges or your service as a cloud consumer, your OPEX charge goes up, your operational expense goes up. So it was all about the number of nines. But now, as we start moving, because initially also it was services that, usually an organization's cloud adoption strategy would be what? I will move non-critical data to the cloud to assess how it goes. And then I can think about moving my critical data to the cloud. Like I would have a few non-critical systems. I will trial it on the cloud. I will see the user experience, like what sort of controls are available. I will rather than burning my hands on critical data or anything of that sort to go into sort of non-compliance or to take that risk, I do it with the non-critical systems experience, the cloud service, the provider, the type of SLAs, are they able to comply with it? And then I decide to move my critical data, provided that I'm in line with all my compliance requirements, my organizational as well as the regulatory authorities. So this is very key, a very key thing that as a cloud consumer, I need to do this. Okay. Then I need to identify what are the minimum security baselines that are not compromisable. And I need to find a cloud provider who can meet, like, who can, who can give assurance, for the lack of a better word, who can give assurance that they are in a position to deliver against these minimum security baselines. And if there are gaps, I have enough compensatory controls to be able to, I can deliver that as a platform. Because as a cloud consumer, you wouldn't want to be stuck where I have to manually go around searching for different bits and pieces to put the entire puzzle together. You'd ideally go to a single broker who can provide you either the cloud broker or the service provider who gives you a more of a complete solution. So I would go about doing that. I would select my cloud service provider, and I would also, like, it is the responsibility of the cloud consumer. This is something that even our auditor on the panel also brought. It is the responsibility of the cloud consumer to make sure that he seeks the necessary assurance. So, you know, it's and you have to insist on it. Look, again, as you said, you know, like, it's not always easy to extract what you want from a cloud service provider. Okay, if it's a smaller organization, if it's a local cloud hosting provider, and you're a large consumer or a large customer, you can still force them to provide you the necessary compliance documentation to show that their house is in order, so you have the necessary assurance that your data is secure, right? It's at the end of the day, it's a matter of getting that assurance so that you can sleep at night and your organization knows that its assets are secure. So, like, do I have these controls in place? And I need to make sure that the cloud service provider or the broker is following these sort of practices that you would expect. It's not just the fact that because they are providing a service, but that does not absolve them of the responsibilities that they need to take as a responsible cloud service provider. And then you need to be in a process of continuous assessment. So you have certain controls that are within you, that is your responsibility, even as the cloud consumer. For example, identity access management, right? So as a cloud consumer, it's up to you to decide who has what level of access to the system from the end user. It's not the cloud service provider who will give you that matrix. So it is your responsibility to make sure that your identity and access management is in line. You're doing a regular review of it. But however, the cloud service provider also should do that as to who of the cloud service from their resource pool has access to a specific environment. To what level is this accessed? Again, as the information security office, you need to monitor. Moving a system to the cloud does not dilute your monitoring responsibilities in any manner, because the only way that you can pick up an anomaly is that if you are monitoring your environment. So moving to the cloud, in fact, as a cloud consumer, it's the old way would be I move my stuff lift and shift, and I have less problems to bother about securities, the cloud provider's headache. But in reality, that is not the case. As a consumer, you need to make sure that you are seeking assurance and you are in a position, you are confident enough to provide that assurance through documentation, through performing periodic tests, through whatever are the number of tools that are available. So this is my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shakir. Let's go fast to Mr. Shafiullah. How are organizations preparing themselves
Abdullah,
to? Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We are slightly tight on time, so maybe if you can take a just quick 2 minutes to end the session, because the next panel is waiting as well.
Okay. So in these 2 minutes, let me allow you, Mr. Shafiullah, in 1 minute, give us something you want to say in the last 1 minute.
Sure. I mean, regarding the organization embracing for IT landscape change, it's very important that we need to partner with business. That's vital, and strategy alignment is required. So there are 2 questions here. One is for the AI and API, how we can handle the risk in today's organization. We can see a lot of companies, they are adopting to RPAs and bots, right? So it's more important that we change our risk strategy from a traditional approach to more of a constructive approach. So operating model should be established. That's number 1. Number 2, the security controls needs to be redrawn. And number 3, there should be a continuous process to evaluate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rami, I apologize for let you waiting. In 1 minute, please.
Yes,
yes.
Excited topic. That's why the panelists take the time by explaining, because it cannot be ended in short. So yeah, I will not add more. They most cover all the points, but here we just need to consider, as they mentioned, the risk assessment and the risk practices. So here, when we are talking about the cloud, we are transform the risk from on-premise to over cloud. So we need to make sure here that the right tools that are in place, that comply and can fit to the risk assessment practice that's been done. So we have to make sure that the network security tools that they're on the place in terms of firewall, VPN, VLANs in the proper way configuration, application security, also configuration that should be have like virtual environment over the cloud, not direct access.
Dear Rami, I'm so sorry to interrupt. We are running short of time, so request you to please summarize.
Yes. All right. So this is the most topics that the tools should be there. Okay, and we can leverage also from automation by implementing the AI solution, which can deal with these risks and vulnerabilities in automated way. So I hope the rest of summit that can cover in right manner, and it was nice to participate with you. Thank you.
Thank you for all our panelists today. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Roger, and back to you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, eminent panel members, Shafiullah, Shakir, Mohammed, Rami, and our panel moderator, Abdullah, for the interactive and extremely insightful panel discussion. I'm sure it was passionate. It was a passionate subject for each one of you. Thank you once again for giving us your precious time, and hope, you have a pleasant day ahead and enjoy the summit.